Good morning, everyone. Good morning. If folks can please take their seats, we'd like to get started.
Good morning. Apparently we have an Uber strike and a Lyft semi-strike going on, so we have a few people who are, the wait times have gone up to like 27 minutes before you get your next piece. So people will be joining us here as the morning goes on. But I did want to welcome you all to CECP's 7th CEO Investor Forum. We are delighted to be here in Chicago. It's our first time here in the Midwest. We've been in New York. My mic on? Can everybody hear me anyway? How's that? All right, you asked for it. Again, good morning and welcome to CECP's 7th CEO Investor Forum. An opportunity for investors and issuers to come together to focus in on sustainable value creation versus merely short-term gains. And for a number of the companies we talked to today, which are long cycle companies, right? Utility industry, focusing in a world that's increasingly short cycle, and that's a really critical issue and a critical opportunity that we have. And we're delighted to be here in Chicago. It's our first time in Chicago. We've had a number of these in New York and the West Coast. And what you kind of got to love about Chicago is the wonderful weather. It is just so good. Because what's great is, a lot of places talk about having 4 seasons. Chicago just has those 2 great seasons, July and winter. But we are glad here to be here with you all for this event. We also would like to thank you all who are here with us today. We also have an online audience that is joining us, and I think we average about 1,000 to 1,500 people who will be listening in across the globe. So we're really delighted, and we wave to all those folks. They'll be having some of the questions that we provided as well as we use technology to kind of reach out to improve this conversation around sustainable business in a real world, not a theoretical, but a real world way as companies and investors kind of share their insights and their thoughts and their plans. So we thank you all. We thank those people who are dialing in. We also thank our good friends from KPMG who helps to make this possible. So we do appreciate all of their efforts and work. And then where's Dan Nielsen? Oh, there he is. All right, and Dan, who has been kind of our point person to help us pull things together here for Chicago. So thanks to Dan, and thanks to you all on this day. For those who don't know, CECP was founded about 20 years ago. It was founded by leaders in business, from the capital markets, even the entertainment world, with the belief that the world's leading companies can and should be a force for good in society. They should be able to build sustainable value and really help build society in a very powerful way. One of the key elements of the early days, and John Whitehead, how many people remember John Whitehead of Goldman Sachs fame, right? John was one of the great investors of all time, Jersey native, by the way, Ralph. And John talked about how we needed to get the capital markets really engaged. Right, in these areas, because if the capital markets were just focused in on trading and short-term activities rather than investing, that would lead to some bad behaviors. And I think anybody's seen any of those, right, that we see from time to time. So we're delighted here at CECP to be able to bring companies together, a number of leading investors, to really talk about this role of business in society and about sustainable business. Each year we bring CEOs together to talk about those topics. We call it the Board of Boards, an event to really discuss about what are key business issues. We've had CEOs talk about when do you speak out on public issues. We've had CEOs who are talking about successes they've had within their enterprises. How do we advance diversity and inclusion efforts? I mean, all really critical topics for today's CEOs in a closed-door gathering. But one of the topics that continued to come up was, this is all nice, but if we're very short-term focused, and all we care about is the quarter, then we can kind of wait a little bit on the environment, or we can wait about some of the social challenges and issues. And a few years ago, we put together a panel, see here, Of these distinguished groups, we had the head of the New York Stock Exchange, Richard Edelman, who is on our board, who's the Edelman Trust Barometer, which talks about trust around the globe and around the world. We had Dominic Barton from McKinsey, so we had all the answers in the room, once you have McKinsey there, as we all know. And we also had Ann Stossball, CEO of CalPERS, the biggest pension fund in America. And to a group of CEOs, which generally is a heavy proportion of white males, and had one of the better lines I've heard in business, as she said, "I think I own a piece of just about every one of you gentlemen, and those few ladies, and you're all too short-term oriented." Now, 86% of the CEOs agreed, but nobody agreed on whose issue it was, because everybody was, it's this way, right? It's you, all you investors care about is the short term. Really, I think that's the traders. Companies, all you care about is the short term. So it really was a dialogue. And out of that, Ann invited the companies to come to Sacramento to share their long-term plans. And companies said, we all have them. We had great discussions. And of course, the CEO said, if we got to go to Sacramento, we're going to have to go to Austin. We'll have to go to Boston. Why don't you guys at CECP do this? So with the help of Bill McNabb, who'll be speaking later on, and others across our group, we said, all right, we'll step up. We've been able to convene CEOs. This is consistent with our mission. I know what this is like, having been a CEO of a publicly traded company and having sat on public and private boards, and see if we can move this forward. So we started this initiative and kind of kicked it off. Officially, a little over 2 years, probably 27 months ago, that we've gotten this going. We put together a world-class governance group. Obviously important as we think about ES&G. Alex Gorsky, chairman and CEO of J&J. 5 companies in America have grown market cap more than $100 billion in the last 5 years. Only J&J is on this side of the Rocky Mountains. Right, so incredible performance, great stuff, but also a long-term perspective as they think about drugs and other areas in a short cycle world. And of course, Bill McNabb, as I mentioned, we'll hear from at Vanguard, the world's second largest asset accumulator, who's increasingly involved, maybe not as vocal sometimes as BlackRock on some of the topics, but very involved in how do we really establish and build sustainable businesses, not short-term gains. And also a world-class advisory board with investors, issuers, public companies, intermediaries who play a great role to bring everything together, and then some foundations who provided us some of the support to date. So great governance, and I think we started to make some progress. This will be our 7th CEO Investor Forum. We're up to dozens of CEOs. Today we'll be over 30 who have shared their long-term plans. Some have come back to present a second time. And we'll hear from some of those today in a specific industry. But we've also been able to get some great research out of this. So this is part of the kind of the tip of the iceberg as we think about that, having CEOs share those plans with investors interactively. And we now have, and I keep this group. Where's Brian Tomlinson? So Brian has pulled a lot of this work together with experts in the field. This is kind of the Bible of this research. And it talks about why you should share a long-term plan, the 5 reasons why. The 7, and about the what should be included, 7 questions that have come in from investors that are not covered on the quarterly call. We also talk about the how. We have a 5-step process we've developed with companies to help coach them through this process. And then the impact, the value of sharing these plans. We actually see that this is an economically significant event. Externally, but internally has also been a great way to bring companies together around these topics and issues. Not only to announce beyond, but also to bring together to make sure you can actually make it happen as we go forward. So very pleased with the progress we have. We'll be rolling this out in multi-channel opportunities in the future. It's also good to see that we are not alone. This is a movement that I think is creating great momentum as we move forward, and we've heard that from various reporting frameworks. We're seeing industries, and I think the utility industry is kind of getting ahead of this, and more so than other industries, which I think can learn from that. We're hearing from many more calls for purpose, and that's what CECP stands for, right? Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose. And we're also hearing from other pronouncements coming out from BlackRock and others that this is about reporting, but it's also about action and how we can drive this forward. So lots of momentum in this whole field of really driving sustainable business. This is just the beginning. As we move forward in our efforts, we really do want to create an environment where long-term plans and this dialogue between issues, investors, and key stakeholders is part of what business does. Certainly have to talk about short-term measurements, but in the context of longer-term purpose, longer-term plans. Continue to support companies on their long-term plans, provide the research and update that as we've mentioned, Lots of opportunities to harmonize the landscape that we see, and also to scale up these long-term plans, which more to come on that, but as we go to a more multi-channel approach as we move forward. Here's just a look over the calendar here for the next few quarters of some of the things that we'll be doing at CECP throughout this year, and as we begin to move into 2020. Again, looking at multi-channel ways that companies can share these plans. We believe these forums are incredibly important for the interactivity and the learning, but how can we expand on that as we move forward? And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce kind of one of the real inspirations of CECP's efforts. I think it was employee number 1 at Series. Also worked with ISS, something he tries to take off his resume these days. Somebody pronounced that the other day as ISIS, but I don't think that's right. I think it's just ISS, which has had certain feedback we hear from both sides of the era, and who has really helped us to really kind of lead a lot of our efforts in this space. Our MC for today, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Toulet. Good stuff.
It's great to be here today. Lovely facility. So we have a great program for you this afternoon. We've got John Hale, Global Head of Sustainability Investing from Morningstar. We have Nick Atkins, CEO of AEP. We've got Ralph Izzo, Chairman, President, and CEO of Public Services Enterprise Group. We have Donna Zircone, President and CEO of the Economic Club of Chicago. And we have Bill McNabb, former Chairman and CEO of Vanguard. If that's not enough, we have a bonus session. We've got Dan Nielsen, Managing Director and Head of ESG and Responsible Investing from Great Lakes Advisors, and Eileen Gordon, former Chairman and CEO of Ingredient. So we're very excited to be here. We're very excited to have a program that has several dynamic speakers. And the first speaker I wanted to introduce today is John Hale from Morningstar. John Hale's PhD, CFA, probably 12 other initials that I can't pronounce. He's a global head of sustainable investing for Chicago-based Morningstar. He's also the primary architect for Morningstar's 5 Globe sustainability ratings, which is a real breakthrough initiative, 1 through 5 globes. I don't think you can get 0 globes, right? No, you can't get 0. So he writes extensively about sustainable investing, including on his blog, The ESG Advisor, which I read in preparing the remarks today and learned that $4 billion in flows happened just this quarter alone, which is a staggering amount. It's a hockey stick. So now that Morningstar, partnering with Sustainalytics, has come up with the de facto standard for assessing which companies are sustainable and responsible, we can now measure the flows in and out of mutual funds. We couldn't do that before. And we can do it in a credible way. So thanks to John and his team, we now have this information, the insights to make better informed investment decisions. When Morningstar talks, investors listen. And John, in my book, gets a 5 out of 5 globes. With that, John.